safe to say that in our society, in Western society, we measure the success of a person in various ways. By the amount of work they do, how productive they are, how well maybe they've climbed the socioeconomic ladder over the years. We believe that success is sometimes determined by the kind of education or how much education a person had, what kind of job they have, how much earning power they have, and how many material things they've accumulated. And by this standard, we might say something like this: well, a doctor is obviously a successful person. He went to med school. He has a thriving practice. He makes good money. And in the same respect, we might say a manual laborer is not so successful. Somebody who perhaps just may not have had much of an education. Somebody whose work puts them squarely in the middle class. And this is a view that we seem to inherit, really, just as a part of our Western values, right? It's a view, though, that can create disparity and injustice in the way we perceive certain people. The way society measures a person's success and worth can cause division and even conflict. No, I'm not suggesting that we scrap the whole model and start over and become socialist or anything like that. But I am telling you that this is not the way of God's kingdom. It's not the way God looks at people. We all know this, and we should know this. God measures success, a person's success, not by external influences such as education or wealth or social standing. Rather, God looks into the heart and soul of a person to determine where success really is. And we know that God has his own standards to measure fulfillment and meaning, which is what it means to be successful in God's eyes, to live in a fulfilled way, a meaningful way. In the story that we hear today, God is the landowner. Everything belongs to him. And we are the workers. God's desire is that each and every human being put in a full day's work. That is, that we use our skills and our talents and our efforts to work in the fields of the world, to build up God's kingdom. And payday is the reward that we will receive for doing this. The goal is for us to be deemed worthy of entering eternal life. Yet isn't it true that not everybody puts in a full day's work? Yes, some of us, maybe many of us, have been faithful most of our lives. We've worked tirelessly for the good of other people. We've been generous, compassionate, loving, forgiving, and faithful for most of our years. And when life concludes, we hope that the Lord will greet us by saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Now enter into the kingdom I've prepared for you." But what about people who have not put in a full day's work? What about those whose lives have been less than spiritually productive? What about those who've not believed? What about those who've not been generous or loving or kind or forgiving? Well, the fact is, according to Jesus, that some, maybe even most of them, may enjoy the same reward at the end of life. They too will be welcomed into God's kingdom. Now, if we are guided by earthly wisdom, we may say to ourselves, wait a minute. How did that person get in? After all, they spent their years wasting their lives on foolish things. Some people neither cared for God or their neighbor. They never went to church. Some of them did downright evil things. How fair is it that they should be treated in the same way that I'm being treated? After all, I practiced my faith. I struggled to do what was right. I did my best to obey God's commandments. I went to church faithfully. I gave to the poor. I sacrificed in order to do right in God's eyes. Now you're telling me that I'll be sharing my reward with these people? Again, we have a way of measuring a person's success and worthiness by what they have accomplished or done in life. What we can't measure, however, is where that person's heart has been. Like the workers in this gospel story, there are some people who have not or could not put in a full day's work. Maybe they were delayed in some way by life's circumstances. Maybe life dealt them a blow, which prevented them from being able to be fully open to God's will. Some people also just take more time to come to maturity, for whatever reason. Some people are so burdened and distracted by other things, they fail to recognize the opportunities to grow in a deeper union with God. Eventually, for a lot of people, they wake up, they smell the coffee. They make the changes that are necessary. They experience conversion. But that can come late in life, as we all know. So the point is, just like those in the story who put in only a couple of hours of work, at least they showed up at some point. They put in some kind of sincere effort to go to work in the fields. And their effort, as limited as it may seem, was enough for them to receive more than what they deserved. They too were paid a full day's wages for even a few hours. After all, isn't the landowner free to treat his workers as he pleases? Isn't God free to be God, to be generous and forgiving, even if it doesn't seem quite fair to us? God does not operate by our standards. He doesn't reward people based on their education or job or earning power or social status. Rather, God rewards the humble, the upright of heart, those who are sincere in their efforts to live life in a meaningful way, those who are eager to work a full day, but not always able to do so. In the end, it is God who will decide who will reap the rewards of salvation, and we may all be surprised to find out who is included. This parable is a difficult one, probably one of the most difficult ones to understand and to accept. The parable, besides teaching about God's standards and measures of success, can also be a warning for us not to allow ourselves or anyone else to be reduced to a reward for the work we do. We cannot be measured by the hours that we labor or by what material things we produce. We are not measured by what we're able to save. We are more than our earthly careers and wages. We are infinitely more valuable than the value society assigns to us. If we really believe that, then we will begin to assign true value to those whom society often shrugs off: the unborn, the sick, the elderly, the poor, and those who are compromised in some way. If we accept God's standard of measuring the worth and value of each person, then we will see true value in ourselves and in other people simply because we exist, all children of a God who is generous beyond measure.